everybody. Welcome to Randy Sands and the Mediumship crew. Tonight is December 21st, but it is also, and somebody correct me if I'm wrong, tonight is the night that Jupiter and Saturn get the closest.
Yep.
Which is going to be something.
0 degrees Aquarius.
Yes, that's going to be something to behold.
I've been trying to watch it, but it's too cloudy here to watch. So I saw some live feeds and showing what they can show, but
well, it'll be interesting times, very interesting times. So tonight we have an amazing topic. The ever so lovely SSK, or otherwise known as Stacy Schuerman-Kopczynski, is going to be doing a review of what I consider a very important spiritualist pioneer, because it's in my own backyard, which is George Colby, who was the founder of Cassadaga, Florida. So SSK, would you like to take the floor and run with it?
Sure, sounds good. See, there he is. A younger one and an older one for comparison purposes. So yeah, the great state of Florida, right? We're in 50 states. We decided to do a warm state for all of us northerners so we can feel warm. So we're going to talk about George Colby. Technically born in what?
For Eve. Eve needs some warmth.
Eve does need warmth. Eve, we're going to Florida. Get ready. We'll be there shortly. We have to make a few trips. We're born in New York. Darn it. But Pike, New York. I don't know where that is. But just for you're all aware, it's Pike, New York.
I've been through there.
All right. Well, that's where he was born.
Right.
He was the middle child, the fifth child, five siblings, 2 sisters, 2 brothers. His sisters passed away very young, 8 and I think 5. They passed away. They were born to his dad and his mom were Americans. They came over. I don't remember from where because I didn't check all the data because I'm more interested in what he did in his later years. So we'll talk about that. But eventually when he was 8, they moved to Minnesota, which is the state right next to Wisconsin. And there they become farmers. His parents were huge in the Baptist religion. And for those of you who might be familiar with Baptist baptisms, they dunk you. And they actually dunked him and baptized him in a river, a frozen river, which almost killed him, actually, when he was about 8. So there you have it. But after that, when he had what probably most would consider a near-death experience from being dunked into the frozen, baptized into the frozen river, he had an uncle that came to him from the spirit world, kind of telling him that he was going to be a medium, be a psychic and know things. And as he grew into his teenage years, he actually did have some amazing psychic ability that he started having probably around 16, 17 years of age. By the age of 19, he dumps his family and baptism to actually follow the spiritualist movement. Interesting enough, he was born in 1848. So for any of you that have been paying attention, that would be the year that the spiritualist movement started with the Fox sisters. And he actually passes to spirit in 1933. But it was around that time of 1890, I wanted to talk about, because I know some of you are mediums here, in the early development of the spiritualist movement and in developing mediumship, even prior to the spiritualist movement, if we go even further back in time and we go to Swedenborg, we go to Andrew Jackson Davis, who we've talked about before, all of them worked with spirit guides. Not a common thing you hear about right now in developing mediumship. Usually now when you hear about developing mediumship, you go straight into connecting to the spirit world and loved ones, bringing through people's family. But in the earlier part of development, more than proving the continuity of life through that evidential mediumship was actually working with spirit guides. So I would be intrigued for all the mediums present, just, if you work with your spirit guides.
I started out working with spirit guides and then went to just connecting with spirit.
I definitely do. And I mean, this is just my personal opinion. I'm not saying it's right or wrong, but I think people are working with spirit guides even if they don't realize they are. I mean, that's just my belief.
Yeah, absolutely. I do. I have to agree with you, Randy. I think so too.
Yeah, we definitely have them. It's just who I think you're more apt to go to a certain spirit guide when you're aware of them rather than just opening yourself to spirit and having any spirit or ascended master or whatever step through.
Yeah, but I think, again, in my opinion, I'm not saying I'm right, but I think that even when you just open up to spirit, you're still working with a guide.
Oh, for sure.
Whether we realize it or not.
Right.
Because we're the middle person. So there's got to be somebody
right
that we're working with on both sides.
I think it was more important when I first started out to deal with a spirit guide because that's how I was taught, by what I read. And then later, it's not so important that you know who that spirit guide is, right?
Oh, I agree. I don't always know who it is, but I know that they're there.
Yeah.
Well, I think it's also, I work with my guide very closely, but at times it's like my guides step aside and I'm working with the guide for whoever I'm communicating with. So I'm working with their guide as opposed to, so I'm kind of eliminating my guide out of the middle a lot of the time. So
yeah, that's interesting. I love it all. I love everything that you guys are talking about, and it's interesting when we truly compare to the movement, right, and the foundation building, if you would, of modern spiritualism. They really didn't focus on the evidential mediumship the way we do now. They were open to the complexity of all different mediumship. So, George here, he was a healer, but he was also known as a trance medium. So you had message mediums, you had trance mediums, you had physical mediums, you had healing mediums, and they didn't really cross wires very much. The more you start kind of reading about them, they didn't necessarily do all of them. They had their niche. Like if you were a healer, you were a healer. In the essence of all mediumship is some form of healing. We agree on that, right? I would assume that we all would shake our heads and be like, yeah, because somebody who gets a really good evidential message, that can bring healing to their grief. The same way as if somebody gets a really good healing, physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, it can also bring healing to whatever is ailing them. But what he was considered, or what he considered himself, so originally, like I said, dunked in water, started to get these, had this near-death experience, had this communication with an uncle, basically prophesizing, here's what's going to happen to you, starts kind of, in a way, secretly developing his mediumship. By 19, he is a full-fledged clairvoyant, and like filling circles, so much so that there were waiting lists to get into a circle. But it wasn't him who was actually bringing the evidence through, it was his guide. That's why I think they called him a trance medium. Right? And so I'm intrigued about, because you hear, like you had Andrew Jackson Davis had Galian, right? Was one of the main guides. And now the Bang sisters didn't really have too much of a spirit guide that you talk about. But when you get into the pioneers who did lectures, they ended up and did trance mediumship. They ended up having like a guide that they worked with. And George's guide, it came to him when he was in Iowa, traveling in groups. Again, you're talking 1890s. This is prior to the NSA forming. You know, we're just kind of, but spiritualism is making that fire across the U.S. At this point, it's, you know, one of the most followed, you know, new coming religions, if you would, to that time period. Mediums were traveling all over the world, having circles, different circles too, right? You had your physical circles, you had your trance circles, you had your sittings or your seances, your message circles. So he, just by word of mouth, because that's really how most of it was done back then, started just kind of filling circles. He was a hot ticket, if you would. Everybody wanted to get into his circle because the evidence that was being produced was phenomenal. So in Iowa, this is when, it sounds like this is when the flip was switched to trance. Again, I wish there was some forms of written documents or recordings where we could read it, but it's kind of just trickling down through articles, letters, that kind of stuff. He then goes into trance in one of his circles, and his guide named Seneca comes through to the group of people. All right, and this guide ends up becoming his main guide for trance mediumship. So what I mean by that is he would go into an altered state of consciousness. George here, well, the young George, this one, well, whatever, you know, the young one with the nice mustache. He would go into a trance state, allowing his spirit guide to kind of, if you would, be forth and talk through him and give messages of continuity or give messages of prophecy to whoever was sitting in the circle. And when this guide was introduced to George, the guide told the circle that he needs to travel to Wisconsin, pick up his little buddy, and head down to Florida, because it was there that he was going to get property to start what at the time they called a community of spiritualists. This is about 1890-ish, right? So that, you know, he's making money kind of traveling, doing circles. He goes to Eau Claire, Wisconsin, and he picks up his buddy, who I really need to find out more about, and I'm searching. So if anybody's from Wisconsin and knows Theodore Gettings, I need to know all about him. Like if he's your uncle, like, because I will ancestor you and I will find you and I will call you. But so he picks up his buddy in Eau Claire. They get on the train. Now this is where my geography starts to get really bad, so I have to apologize, so maybe Randy can help me. The train only goes to Jacksonville. I don't know where that is. Where is that in comparison to Cassadaga now? Randy, do you know? You got to unmute yourself.
Just north.
Yeah, just north of it. About an hour.
Okay. So this, excuse me, this is in about 1880, not 1890, 1880. He gets on the train with his buddy TD, Theodore. I need more information on Teddy here. Him and Teddy get on the train to Jacksonville, and they set out to look for this land. He goes into trance. Again, they're talking to Seneca, they're talking to this guide, and it's like over 7 little mountains, and there's water, you know, there's all this stuff. And they go by boat. I don't know how this all works. Again, I don't know the rivers. You guys are going to have to look all this up if you're really into geography. I'm kind of opposite of geography. I don't understand it. And they just kind of move down, and then they find this land in about 1880, 1881. He applies for homesteading. He's granted 75 acres in 1884. Which is now Cassadaga Spiritualist Camp. But before we get to the camp, we're going to figure out how this all works. At that time, he gets TB. So now he's ill and he's suffering from tuberculosis. He is trying hard to keep traveling because he's at this point now, again, we are in the the throes of the spiritualist movement, right? So now we're up to like, 1890, 1893. In his travels, well, prior to that, he goes to Ohio. He meets a governor in Ohio. They get talking because they are also trying to form a camp. And the Ohio mayor says, you should go to the City of Lights, otherwise known as Lilydale camp, that is in Fredonia County. You need to go there. There's a camp that has started that is all about spiritualism. So George hightails it to Lilydale. Lilydale. Now we'll get into the history of camps because I do want to talk about the importance of spiritualist camps, because they actually began prior to our organization, and they actually began like sometimes as soon as months after the spiritualist movement really started to take off. So we'll talk a little bit about camps, but the reason that Lilydale is so important, and I think that, and I'm so glad because I just saw somebody pop on who actually lives there, because I believe their lake is actually called Cassadaga Lake, and that's how you're going to find out he gets the name Cassadaga. So he goes to Lilydale. He sees this community forming. He sees that they're building houses, that they're just kind of creating this, not necessarily a camp, but a community to practice the science, philosophy, and religion of spiritualism freely. This is kind of what he does. This is his passion. He's traveling to different churches. He's speaking. He's doing trance demonstrations. He's doing all of this. Mind you, still having TB, tuberculosis, right? Seneca comes back to him and says, you need to go back to your camp and you need to drink the water and smell the pine smoke, which I don't understand if anybody knows what that is. Is that like burning pine needles? But I can't imagine there's pine trees in Florida.
There are.
Oh, there are? Okay, good.
There are in that area. I believe they're called scrub pines.
Okay, so he's told to do that. He goes back to Cassadaga. He drinks the water. He inhales the pine smoke and basically is, in a way, I don't want to say cured of tuberculosis. He thinks he's cured, but he becomes well by listening to his guide Seneca. So then he travels to the first convention of spiritualism, of spiritualists in New York in 1893. There he meets Marion Skidmore, who is one of my favorite. And if anybody wants a little piece of history, not that the NSAC will ever be on jeopardy, but if they ever are and they say who owned the building that the NSAC office currently resides in, you can click your clicker and say, who is Marion Skidmore? Because that's where she lived, was our office. So, and he meets E.W. Bond from Ohio. And it's those two that come down and actually help Cassadaga become the spiritualist camp it is, known as the second most populated spiritualist camp in the world. Obviously, the first would be Lilydale.
What's interesting, Stacy, is, and I'm not going to swear that this is fact because I'm going to be quite honest that I haven't done my research. But, I'm in and out of Cassadaga quite frequently. And my understanding is it took him about 20 years from when he owned the land to actually the camp taking off, which I thought was quite interesting.
And it was 10 years.
Was it?
It was 1894 that, what is the name? Southern Cassadaga Spiritualist Camp Meeting Association actually formed. It was 10 years. 1884 is when he got the land, took ownership of the 75 acres. Now, he only donated 35 acres to form Cassadaga. He kept the other acreages to actually farm when he wasn't traveling, but he's considered one of the first snowbird mediums. if you would. So coming from the north and coming down, because Cassadaga's season runs opposite of Lilydale's season. So Cassadaga's season is just about to start in January, I believe. It runs January, February, March, right, Randy? Pretty sure. They're kind of becoming year-round camps.
I was about to say, Cassadaga is pretty much year-round because our weather is year-round.
Yeah. And they actually named it, there's conflicting results on why it got named Cassadaga. So in the Seneca Indian tribes, Cassadaga means rocks beneath the water, which there's 2 lakes in Cassadaga, or actually a pond and a lake that can be droughted, actually. They actually can, like, dry up. But they were, one of them are supposed to be known as a live spring. That was the water he drank. He was supposed to drink water from the spring in Cassadaga to cure him of the TB. So some people say it was named Cassadaga because of the Indian Seneca language of what Cassadaga means and how he was instructed to find it, or the fact that it was formed by and helped formed by those in Lilydale, which had Cassadaga Lake. And it was kind of, actually, if you really want to dig into the logistics, when I first started to learn about the camps, Lilydale was the first. That hasn't been proven different yet to me in my mind. Maybe the first to organize. A lot of the other camps around the U.S. were actually started as maybe Unitarian camps. Like the one in Wisconsin was actually a Unity camp, it started out to be, that turned Spiritualist. So I'm not sure if, so basically it's a debate. When I first heard about it, it was all of the mediums who didn't like winter went down to Cassadaga and lived there. That's why their seasons don't cross, right? Because in the summer they're working in Lilydale, New York, and in the winter they're working in Cassadaga, Florida. Now, I know in the 60s and 70s that to be the case, 1960s and 70s, that to be the case. But actually, when both camps completely formed, travel wasn't that easy. I mean, think about it. You're talking 1890s. And if the train only went to Jacksonville, how are they getting to Cassadaga so easily? Do you know what I mean? Does that make sense to everybody? Or am I just overthinking this?
Or some buggy.
Bobby, yeah. Unmute yourself. There you
Well,
go.
I was just thinking, yes, travel wasn't that good, but look at, you had Susan B. Anthony and Cora Richmond and stuff getting 3,000 people at a crack to show up at places. How did they even find out about it? Much less travel, but we know it did happen.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's actually, you're touching on actually why camps actually started. The whole idea of a camp was a church or a house or a center couldn't hold the capacity of those people that were coming to either witness mediumship or to demonstrate mediumship or to hear the lectures that were being held. So camps became really these communities. Cassadaga, particularly, obviously because we're focused on George Colby, Cassadaga was really kind of one of the first ones to pop up some, well, Lilydale and Cassadaga both. If you go to those camps, you'll see traditional houses. Like you'll see hotels for that time. And tens of thousands of people would show up in one season to hear all those types of speakers. And, I do like newspapers.com and I do research, and you don't see, I think back to Bobby's point, I think a lot of it was word of mouth. These camps, because we're not the only religion to form camps, if you would, right? Or communities. The Shakers had camps and communities, the Methodists, the Baptists, it's nothing new. Religion would, find kind of a center area for everyone to meet from around the area. So it was kind of like a gathering place for the many, if you would. All the different churches would come together. That's why you find a lot of churches close in the summer, or did in the summer, right? So, because everyone would go to camp. It's like that's where you went, and they would bring in the big speakers, the big demonstrators, the popular mediums of that time, and everyone would see them. And then they would technically there's no place to camp in Cassadaga, just so you know. you can hang out at the hotel, but you can't camp. Colleen.
So one of the things that, because I am a docent at the Susan B. Anthony House here in Rochester, and Susan B. Anthony went on Lyceum tours. And there was actually people that organized these tours, and they went from camp to camp to camp to camp to camp. And then that's how they drew everybody, is because there was a tour.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, can you imagine what a fantastic opportunity? Do like if you look at some of so first of all, there technically, not in every state, but in a lot of states, there could always be found a spiritualist camp. A lot of them don't exist anymore. But there usually was one little, even tiny, if it might be tiny, camp for where the whole state would come together. Like Colleen said, lyceums, or go ahead, Randy. I feel like you were moving up to the mic.
Well, I wasn't, but that's okay. Just so you know, there isn't anywhere to camp in Cassadaga, but there is right outside.
Right. Well,
and there's a hotel and a bed and breakfast. The hotel's amazing. I have a friend that works there. I know the owner a little bit, and it's a fun place to go, especially if you like to do a lot of photography at night and pick up orbs and spirit and things like that.
Originally, Cassadaga was 55 acres, then down to 35 acres, and now it's even less because as the time went by, camps, I gotta figure out how to politically say this out right. Camps started to lose their luster when travel became way easier, right? Their lackluster, if you would. If you really look at the geographical areas of camps, you're going to find that there used to be a train station that went right through that town, right? Or very close to that town. And once the train started, traveling by train got replaced by automobiles and flight, the camps kind of started to dwindle, if you would, a little bit on the amount of people they had. And Cassadaga, like anything, suffered during the Depression also, and actually sold off and lost some of its land and buildings, like the hotel. The hotel is no longer owned by the camp. It's a private owner, actually, right? Yeah, I think it's the second private owner. Beautiful hotel. But Lilydale too is also very comparable in that structure. There's a few camps in California that are still very active. There's a camp, of course, in Wisconsin. We all know of Chesterfield in Indiana, or some of you might know of Chesterfield in Indiana. That's another one. But if you really dig into some of these camps, you'll see their beautiful buildings, and you can tell they had tens of thousands of people just by the buildings they have established there, right? But now, obviously, some of their buildings are in dire need of repair. They're hundreds of years old. We would love for them to all last forever. And there's the upkeep of it. But Cassadaga is gorgeous. Their temple, they actually have the Colby temple, which is named after him, obviously, George Colby, is also in need of repair. So if you see this and you want to help, go to the camp websites, because I'll tell you, they all have donate buttons, and donate to the preservation of the history of spiritualism, because really it's it's definitely needed, and should be, because it's like Colleen was saying with Susan B. Anthony. I mean, she sat on the porch. She sat on Marion Skidmore's porch. I just go and sit on the stairs just to be in the presence of someone so wonderful, right? Like, you can't, it's like, what? I can't even get over that kind of stuff. And the same thing happened in Cassadaga, and it kind of came that, there's, I think, 55 homes at one time. Cassadaga had 55 in the camp itself. Again, most camps like Cassadaga or Lilydale, the land is owned by the camp association, but the homes are owned by the owners. So Colby's house, for example, again, he got 75 acres. He kept 30, and he eventually started selling those off. He spent the rest of his life dedicated to spiritualism, traveling. He also never married and did adopt children, actually 7. He adopted 7, I think 6 boys, 1 girl. He actually adopted children, put them through education. But when his time here on the earth plane was coming to an end, he actually died broke. And Cassadaga took care of him the last couple years of his life. The mediums in Cassadaga took care of him, and then they took care of his burial and his remains. But I think what he did, 2 things that are important about George. 2 things. 1, his dedication to working with his guides. If you're ever, here's the thing with the guides you have to work with in balance, and I'll let the other mediums here talk about it a little bit too. Morris Pratt, we talked about him already, but he went to a medium. He was directed by the medium to buy this land. He buys this land. He makes now the equivalent of like $2.5 million, right? Literally by investing about $200, right? He listens to the medium. He does what the medium's guide tells him to do, and he's able to do this. Now George Colby, same thing. Now it's his guide. His guide says, you're going to form a community south in Florida. You're going to go here. You're looking for this natural spring lake. You're looking for 7 mountains or 7. It's not mountains because there's no mountains in Florida, but it's like 7 hills. I think that's what it is. 7 hills. So there's actually like 7 hills that you can find within his land that he owned at one time. He goes and he finds it. This is where I think it's so important, is that we do have guides and teachers, like Randy said, even if we don't even know we're working with them. There are certain times we should listen, and then there's certain times we need to live. And there's a balance between the two, which is really important. Like if my spirit guide tells me to go jump off a bridge, I'm going to tell him, go ahead. I'm going to say, right? But if my spirit guide says, maybe one day you're going to write a book if you ever sit down and actually do it, well, maybe I should listen, right? And I think that what I'm finding in doing all of this research for all of these great pioneers is that a lot of them trusted what they got from spirit in a balanced way, right? Because it can easily go imbalanced. What's your suggestions, you mediums who work with all your guides? How do you stay balanced?
I know for me, I'm living except when they're talking to me. When they're talking to me, I'm listening.
Wow, everybody else is like crickets.
No, crickets make more noise.
So having balance with your guides is when you have good boundaries. You have to have those boundaries set out. And once you have those boundaries set out, I don't think about it anymore because I have the structure that I work in.
Yeah. Tammy?
I basically just ask for my highest and best, and when it comes through, I listen, and the rest of the time I live and try and help others.
Yeah.
Mhm. That's important. That's really important, helping others.
Yeah. Well, and it seems like that's what most of them did. Do you know what I mean? They got messages from a higher source, from their guides, that they needed to do this, this, and this, so that they will do this, this, and this. You know, and I would love to have George here right now because I have about 800 million questions I want to ask. Right? 'Cause I
You,
think
I have so many, all the way down to nooks and crannies within the hotel.
Yeah. Well, he didn't build the hotel. Like he wasn't really necessarily completely responsible for all the buildings that are there.
I know, but he would know.
Well, any spirit that's there might know, wouldn't you?
But you said if he was here,
Oh, I know. I know.
I would have a lot of questions.
a lot.
A lot.
Well, you know, now to just digress again, because that's what I like to do in thought processes. You know, again, we're talking about the movement of spiritualism. Modern spiritualism really starts in America, right? It ends up casting its net worldwide. It goes to England. England actually accepts it a lot easier than I think America did. So that's why I think you see it flourishing still in England. But we're on our rebound. I mean, we're on our growth pattern also. But what I find so fascinating about if he was here is to actually talk about that process. Like, was it just a vision that he was going to go and find this land and he just knew when he arrived on the land that this was the place to be? Or was it a continual reminder, like little nudges down the path?
Do you see what I mean? He'd probably tell me, go away, girl, you're bugging me. You ask too many questions, go away.
I find that things come in little bits at a time.
Yeah.
Like you're led to do something, and then once you, almost like a scavenger hunt, right?
Yeah.
Once you get the message to do something, you do that, and it seems like once you get to that point, then you're led further, to do something.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and and this is probably why they say to write stuff down. Like, I want all these pioneers' journals, because you know darn well they wrote this stuff down. I just need to get my grubby hands on it somehow. Just give me like 5 minutes just so I can read and smell the paper. But no, seriously, because we're told that all the time to write things down. I'm told things, either by my own team, by my own spirit team, or like my friends, like Randy be like, hey, the other day I saw this, you were buying a sumo blow up costume. And I'm like, haha, funny. And then like, I don't write it down, but then who knows, like 20 years from now, I'm, spiritually sumo wrestling my way across the country. I don't know.
And just to be clear, I never said that to her.
It's kind of fun though. I have journals from like 1980s, and I go back and I reread them, and so many things happen that a lot of it you just forget.
Yeah.
And it's amazing to relive it by reading it again.
Well, and he trusts. There's the other big thing. When you look at some of the great trance mediums, the physical mediums, the healers, like Harry Edwards, when we look at all of these pioneers, all of these mediums who paved the way to give us the right to do our mediumship now, they trusted. They didn't sit there and go, oh, you know what, though? What if that just doesn't work? Like, I never thought about this perspective, and what if this shows up, and well, what about this? They just said, oh, no. I was told. It came to me in a vision. I know. And they just do it. Right. And, like, look what he does. He leaves behind this legacy, this camp that is becoming one of the few. I hate to say it, and hopefully we can revive a lot of these camps. We should revive. Again, there's the second most important thing he did. He established in a community. Don't we all want to be part of a tribe? Like, don't we all want to be part of a community where we feel comfortable?
Stacy, can I say something? Because
Sure.
You said something that in my mind is of the utmost importance, which is these pioneers paved the way for us to have freedoms to practice our mediumship today. That is monumental. And anybody watching this that's a medium, the reason we do these pioneer reviews is because I feel that we need to continue paving that way for the future generations to come. There's got to have continual progress. I don't think that it would be right for us to sit back on our laurels and enjoy the freedoms we have without taking the responsibility to continue them moving forward.
Yeah. And you know, the best way you can do that is, of course, by good thoughts and prayers and attentions always, but learning about them, continuing their message about them, and if you can, help these camps. Do you know there's directories of them all over online? You know, you can go to nsac.org. There's a directory of certain camps. Some camps are independent aside from the the NSAC organization, but check them out. You know, help if you can't help financially, help through thought, through prayer, help with your time when you go visit there. You know, ask if you can volunteer. A lot of the camps, you know, especially during their season, they're looking for volunteers to help with, you know, and what do you expect at a camp, I guess, before we run out of time. The thing is I want to just quickly talk about what you can expect at camps. Most camps, now, like Cassadaga and Lilydale are becoming more year-round. Same thing with Chesterfield. Chesterfield, which is in Indiana, is also kind of becoming a year-round camp. But most camps have seasons. So again,
Right.
that's going to vary depending on the camp. We know obviously Cassadaga being in Florida is more now, January, February, March. But yet they are open year-round on certain things. You know, Lilydale used to be, and still is, their season is technically June, July, August, but they're starting to do more year-round events. But in the season is when the big programs go on, just kind of like they did back the Lyceum program. They might not call it Lyceum anymore, but they bring in mediums, they bring in near-death experience researchers. They bring all different types of speakers in, and every day something is happening. And every day mediumship is being done. Either if it's healing mediumship, if it's mental mediumship, message mediumship, if it's inspirational speaking, that trance mediumship. Every day some form is being done. And you can go by just supporting that. Share it on your Facebook page when their seasons come up. Share their campsites, share their websites. To help kind of keep those camps alive. You know, I think, you know what, he got the land, I wrote it all down, 1884. So, I mean, all these years later, hundreds of years later, this camp that he had this vision of, that his guy gave him this vision of, and out of nowhere picks up his buddy and gets on a train. Talk about, you know, stepping outside your comfort zone. I don't think we've managed to do much of that compared to what these people did. Because I'm telling you, they didn't have indoor plumbing, so I'm out. You know, like, I ain't going. Like, nope, not happening. But, you know, and they trusted in spirit, and they went, and then they formed these communities, which, again, I can't. So that's what you can expect. And each house or each cabin might have their own medium. There is some rules that you should follow, and please look into the etiquette of rules when you visit camps, because a lot of camps have a lot of members who have went through a process to be able to do mediumship. So you can't just step onto their camp and be like, oh, I'm a medium and I'm going to give you all these messages, because that's not necessarily how it works, right? So you want to make sure that you follow the proper etiquette when you go to the camps, you know, and most of the time they're going to tell you. Right, the camps are going to have some sort of do's and don'ts on how to do it. But those mediums that work those camps have been tested by the camp boards, and, you know, and basically got the stamp of approval, if you would, by those boards at that time to be the mediums. And they do love guest mediums. I'm not saying that they don't, if you're a medium, you know, but find out what the rules are for being a guest medium on these camps, and then enjoy it. Talk to the people around you, because 99% of the people around you are just as like-minded as you are and open-minded as you are and want to tell their story of how they understand mediumship.
And you know, another way to continue paying it forward and keeping the movement going and respecting the pioneers is to go and meet people, make friendships, build your support system, build your group. Because the better your support system is with other spiritual people, the more solid your foundation is going to be. And where there's groups of people, there's movement, there's energy, you know. And if you can't support financially or what have you, get out there and swing a hammer if they need help building something. You know, there's other ways to do it. There's other ways to do it. You know, grab a rake, rake up leaves, whatever. Just help some way or another. Pay it forward for us having the freedoms we have today.
If you want to know
And
more, oh, sorry, go ahead, Colleen.
And sometimes it's just sharing about the different places, just sharing it on your social media, sharing it with other people. I know I've served at Camp Etna. Last summer I served at Temple Heights, you know, and you get to experience all these different places, and it changes how you actually function in this world, because you have this broader view of mediumship.
And a broader net of people. Like some of the people I have met from just going to these camps have changed my life, you know, and have become my spiritual family, you know, by just getting to know them, you know. I do want to just put a quick shout out, since we are in the lovely state of Florida, and I highly doubt she'll ever see this, but the Reverend Marilyn Autry actually lives close to Cassadaga, and she is probably one of the most current pioneers in my mind who has paved the way. She wrote an excellent book about the history of Cassadaga. So
And
if you're
don't be so sure she won't see it, because I'll call DJ and tell DJ to tell her.
She's a phenomenal spiritualist also, and wrote an excellent book about Cassadaga, and knows a lot about it, because the NSAC office was in Cassadaga for quite many years, actually, and that was our home front. So I would definitely reach out. She actually wrote quite many books about spiritualism, so if you can get your hands on any of her books, they're fantastic. She wrote, my favorite one is the flow of life, the river of life. It's all about natural and spiritual laws, which, you know, is besides pioneers, it's pioneers and laws. Those are my two favorite things ever in the whole
And
world.
I know that you can get that in the Cassadaga bookstore, and I bet you can get that at NSAC, and possibly even at the Lilydale bookstore if anybody's having trouble and they want to get it. And with that, I think we need to close out, because we have something else that we need to do on Facebook Live.
I know, look how fast that goes.
Right?
Yeah, thanks for listening to me yap.
Well, thank you, sweetheart. It's always, you know, we love you. I love when you come in. I absolutely do.
So Florida's down. Check off our list now.
Now we need California.
Oh, there's so much there.
No, you got to do Maine.
I'm not going to tell you. I'm not going to tell you which state to do next, honey. You do what you want to do.
You know, Colleen, I love Maine too, but Maine might have to be a 7-parter. Do you know how many of our great pioneers came from Maine?
Hey, we can do a 7-parter.
Vanderbilt, my most favorite one ever.
We can do a 7-parter.
I sat on her front porch.
Stop it. I'm making it there. I'm going to get there one day.
I know you will. I know you will. So everybody, let's all say goodnight to the good, happy people so that we can jump over onto the Facebook Live. Thank you all for joining us. And as always, Stacy, much love and thank you.
Thanks, Stacy.